It's my pleasure to welcome Congressman Neal to this Zoom, and he is our special guest this morning and has done an incredible job, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes, but I think it's important for me to turn over the floor to Congressman Neal for some opening comments.
Well, thanks, Madam President, and it's a delight for me to accept your invitation. Springfield College is a world-renowned institution. It has produced leaders for as long as I can remember, but it's also, in its mission statement, I've committed to the idea of civic participation, civic engagement, and I've watched not just the individuals who come through the doors of Springfield College, but I've worked with many of the past presidents, and they were all committed to the idea of a wider participation in our democracy. So accepting an invitation from Springfield College would be, for me, just about a universal opportunity. Delighted to do it.
Thank you very much. Well, and on behalf of not just the people on this Zoom, but really the larger community, Congressman Neal, your work on behalf of the economic relief packages for COVID has been incredible. It has just been, from my perspective, and I had a chance to, I think, leave you a note on your voicemail over the holidays to tell you were the biggest gift we had all year. And your leadership has been unbelievable, and we can't thank you enough. And so I'm not sure we can say it enough, but I do want to say thank you for your contributions and your leadership. As we go into this year, I've had an opportunity to teach a course, and I normally don't teach because I'm usually on the road, but I had an opportunity to step in and teach a course for a faculty member that was unable to teach it. And the course is on leadership and management, particularly for nonprofit leaders, those especially that are looking to work in the YMCA. Many of you know we've got a long history with the Y. And so these are juniors and seniors that are planning on becoming Y leaders. And so we have spent the entire semester talking about leadership in turbulent times, and the Y, like many other organizations, has suffered greatly in terms of membership and closing and all of their conditions. But I've had an opportunity to bring in leaders to speak to the class about their thoughts about what is important leading during such an interesting time. So I'm going to start with a very simple question. I'm going to ask Congressman Neal to start us off. What has been your greatest challenge as you look back to the 13 months of what we've been experiencing since almost a year ago? Your greatest challenge.
Well, first, Madam President, pleased with the idea that I have been a member of the Springfield YMCA for almost 50 years, and with any luck, I'll be there on Saturday afternoon. I'm well aware of the connection between Springfield College and the YMCA. I think that we've gone through a tumultuous period of time where conflict has become too much a part of the national conversation. I think that social media hyperventilates conflict. I think that talk radio, cable shows, they build audiences based upon conflict. And I think that there's more emphasis in our political system on conflict than there is on the reassurance of governance. And I think clickbaits have become more and more an indication of what people desire. It's how many clicks you can get. And I think that the national conversation is quite different than the one that I joined many years ago. And the other part of this is, I think that you find more and more members of Congress, and I think that I'll let the legislators speak to that issue, but the other part of it is, it's about building their own brand. So I'm more of the mindset of the collective good, what de Tocqueville described as a habit of the heart, which set America apart from the rest of the world. And I think that that collective wisdom that we used first in writing the CARES Act, which the Ways and Means Committee wrote most of, subsequently writing the $905 billion package in December, which the Ways and Means Committee wrote most of. And when the Speaker and the President talked to me at the White House just about 1 month ago, I gave them a series of suggestions that I thought that we were capable of doing. And the Ways and Means Committee wrote $1 trillion of the $1.9 trillion package. What we did with the child care credit, the earned income tax credit, the dependent child credit, the checks to the American people, the retention tax credit, the small business loans. I mean, it's nice to call the cable stations to see if you can get on there, which I never do and have never done, or you can have the respect of your peers. He knows what he's doing. He gets things done. So the calls that I took the day that the package passed, President Biden was on that phone. And he said, thanks for what you did. Speaker Pelosi was on the phone immediately. And then I called Governor Baker. We told him it was coming. And he said, I will take the chairman's call whenever he's ready. So for Massachusetts, this is an enormous boost. This is tens of billions of dollars that are coming to the state. And we have an infrastructure bill coming up, which I expect to write most of as well. And one piece of advice that I would give, Madam President, since you raised the issue, I think there's more of a reluctance now by political people to tell their most fervent supporters they might be wrong. The easiest thing in public life is to tell your supporters how much you love them, because you do. How grateful you are, because you are. How important they are, because they are. But there are also times when, as Edmund Burke, the great legislator, reminds us, we owe the people our judgment. And I think promising things that can't be delivered only contributes to the cynicism that is reinforced in the social media orbit.
Agreed. I do think that when I think about my own constituencies, we've made so many decisions so fast. Normally, and certainly I wasn't here when the tornado hit a number of years ago, but when you have a challenge, sometimes it's a period of time, whether it be a tornado or another catastrophe. This catastrophe continues to give, and it's the longest catastrophe that we've had to lead through. And so turbulent times doesn't really even capture that. But the series of decisions that we've had to make over, and we're not done yet. I mean, there are more decisions underway. And I won't go into all those details. I know you're following many of those as well. But let me open it up to others that are on the Zoom. What has been your greatest challenge in the last 13, 14 months in dealing with COVID-19 and all that has come with it? And as I said, for you, those of you that joined, as you unmute yourself, just introduce yourself the very first time you speak and your the representation area that you are serving, the district.
Well, good morning, State Representative Bud L. Williams, and to my dear friend, Chairman Neal. Welcome to the 11th Hamden District virtual breakfast. Thank you. I haven't been walking by Springfield College. I've been going the opposite way, but we'll get back on track. Thanks, Chairman Neal. Appreciate you and your very hard, tenacious work that you've done for not only for the district, but for America. We really appreciate it, and to President Biden for doing the right thing. And I've been challenged. The House and the Senate produced a very new committee, and I was so named with all honor, race relations, civil rights, and equity. And the Speaker and the Senate President has charged us, myself and Senator Sonia, to look at, Chairman Neal, the structural racism at every institute in this country. And we plan to do that, take a hard look. And Chairman Neal knows he's been a civil rights warrior for many, many, many years. Walked with John Lewis, and I hope you guys get that that bill done, that voting bill, with that very good news coming out of Washington on yesterday. Appreciate that. That's going to be very, very helpful. And then the pandemic, which that's been my biggest challenge. As you know, this dreaded, deadly pandemic has really caused havoc on Black and brown people within districts in the heart of the city. And certainly the Rescue Act is going to make our life a lot easier, raise the poverty level of individuals. They're saying maybe 50%. Fantastic news. We're getting close to $8 billion in Massachusetts, thanks to Chairman Neal, and over almost 100 million to Springfield. And I was on the phone with the mayor a couple of days ago. We're excited. That's going to hopefully make our lives a lot easier to deal with, to right the wrong of the last 4 years You know, Trump dug us a big hole that we're trying to get out of, a big hole. And to you, Madam President, your hard, tenacious work, I know it hasn't been easy, but you've managed to navigate during this turbulent times in terms of making the educational opportunity still stay there for young people. So that's our challenge. We're still trying to convince individuals to get vaccinated, take the shots. That's been difficult, Chairman Neal, in some quarters of society, especially Black and brown people. But we're out there, we're fighting. And let me get back. Let me take a step back before the Rescue Act. Thank you for the money for the businesses, the small businesses, the lunches, all of that stuff, free lunches for our young people, the direct grants to businesses. They're very appreciative, very appreciative. It has helped. And if we didn't have that help from Washington, I don't know where we would be as a city. So with that being said, I'm gonna pass. I see Rep. Finn getting ready to jump in there. He's biting at the bit. So I'm gonna pass the mic.
Thank you, Bud.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Madam President, and to Congressman Neal. I guess I'll echo Representative Williams' thank yous for the stimulus money that was just most recently passed. It's going to mean make a big difference to, all of our districts. As many of you are probably well aware, education funding is something that has been most prevalent on local districts' minds. The folks that have removed themselves from the roles or in the student population counts that dictate how much money each city and town get through Chapter 70 is something is really concerning for a lot of districts. And just to know that, from what I've heard from the Secretary of Education here in the Commonwealth and others, to know that, whatever monies that is put into Chapter 70 through the state legislature is going to be supplemented by, so many more dollars that are going to be coming from the federal government to help all of the kids in the Commonwealth is just, for me, it's a relief to know that support is going to be there. But to more directly answer your question, is one of the things that I found, distressing, and I think it's to the point that Rep. Williams spoke about earlier, is the fact that when COVID first hit, I think one of the biggest surprises really that I found from my constituents was the fact that so many people found it so hard to believe that there were actually rules and regulations surrounding how to get unemployment, how many weeks of unemployment they can get. I heard on more than one occasion, and I found it disheartening to know that, members of my own community, the people that I represent, felt this way, but they just thought that, unemployment benefits were just something that was available, and you just had, you just put your name in and you got it, or disability funding, or there were so many different programs that people who had never had to, reach out and ask for help, who were in that position, found that there were rules surrounding that, and that the government was actually doing their job and verifying and cross-checking all these things. And so, that was one of the bigger things. But then, more importantly, I think what I found at the beginning of COVID, which was so significant, I think, for everybody, no matter what where they were in life, was the fear that was felt across this country of the unknown. And I can only imagine that that's what people went through during the Great Depression, like not knowing where their next paycheck is going to come from, not knowing whether their homes were going to be foreclosed on because they couldn't make mortgage payments. And so I think that, it's something that, when I talk to my own kids about it, like, here, this is something that we've never experienced. And you're going to be telling your kids like, oh, I remember what it was like to live through COVID when it hit, and how, like the level of fear is just something that I had never experienced. And I think there were a lot of lessons learned from this. And I think that the government in all areas has responded, as good or better than I think many people would have expected. And so, I'm happy to have played a very small role in that. And I'm grateful that my congressman is leading the charge in the federal government, and the benefits are going to be there for people to see here in Massachusetts. And so I think I've probably talked too long, but whoever's next can, I think, I see Senator Gomez actually has his hand up. He's using the technology.
Then the floor is, thank you, Mike.
I just want to chime real quick. With all due respect, I have to say this. I'm just moved. It's almost like when you get around Congressman Neal, it's almost like being in a Baptist church, because he gets you all wound up. He gets you ready. And I'm glad Adam Gomez is on. We're all from the north end of Springfield, which is probably one of the poorest communities in Springfield at the time of our raising up. And just for Chairman Neal, Ways and Means, we know how busy he is, to take the time out to do something with one of our local colleges is phenomenal. But we all look at where he is now as an individual, as a human being. I know where he came from. He had the pebble in his shoe. Okay, he wasn't of rich means. He didn't come from a family that had money, a monetary. Poor, lost his parents. He was a young man, worked his way to the top by hard work. I think that's the story. That's the American story. That's the American story. Pull yourself up. He did it. We look at him now. We look at the results. We don't see the pain and the labor and the spikes in your hand and the webs on your back. That's biblical, but it's important. I think people have to understand and recognize that. And he hasn't forgotten his roots. That's what I love about it. He hasn't forgotten where he's come from. A lot of people become big and famous people, and you don't see them again. They mention where they come from, but they never go back to where they come from. So I just want to tip my hat off to my
great
friend that I really mean.
I was about 10 years old, we've been friends, pal.
I mean, the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Richie. And I know, hey, your life wasn't no crystal staircase. You know, you had the pebble in your shoe, as Mo Jones used to say. And you did it you did it the old-fashioned way. You worked at it. That's the American story. And I think
Thank you, Bud.
When you do your book,
Adam, you're going to have to be quicker on your unmute button if you want to jump in here, because this is, really the will of the technology.
I'm trying to give roses to my elders while they're still here. I have had the great privilege of growing up around Chairman Neal and State Rep Bud Williams, and now being able to co-chair children's families and people with disability with Rep Finn. I'm definitely surrounded by a lot of tenure. I was been able to serve before at this capacity as a Springfield City Councilor. I actually am a YMCA kid. I grew up with Bud Williams and also with Chairman Neal's son. Chairman Neal used to sit down right there and watch us play basketball at the Y, and talk to us. And as a kid visiting DC when he was a young congressman, now he's still a young congressman, and whenever when issues that are important to the district, he's always picked up the phone, always made sure to answer the call. But and myself, I ended up working at the Y. I know that in the beginning when you had started the conversation, you had some people on the call, and I want to just speak on that context of interested in working at the YMCA. I actually ended up, one of my first jobs was working at the YMCA. I worked as a group leader at a camp, and I ended up becoming a director of a youth program, the North End Youth Center. And then from there, I ended up becoming the camp director of Camp Weber for a little while. So I spent quite a lot of time around the YMCA and connecting, obviously, with Springfield College. I just want to let folks know that, the sky's the limit. When you work hard at something, never in a million years did I believe that I was going to be a state senator. But I think when it comes to coming from a place of compassion during these challenging times when a lot of my colleagues had just stated that I think that, a lot of these issues that are happening during COVID. I grew up in the north end of Springfield, like Rep. Williams had stated, one of the poorest districts in Massachusetts. I still live in the same street that I grew up on. I'm raising my children in the same neighborhood I grew up in. And respectfully, I think that a lot of these issues that have been exacerbated because of COVID-19 has existed for quite a while. A lot of these issues that have in systems that, you know, we're looking for equity, we're looking for a lot of, reforms in different systems, not just in police reform and housing and healthcare and obviously in education as well. And obviously with the budget that's coming through on a state level that, you know, funding the Student Opportunity Act that Rep. Finn had so eloquently had stated, we know that, you know, unenrollment is down across the river in West Springfield and other districts that are going to create, you know, as exciting as it sounds that we're going to fully fund public education. Secondly, when it comes to an unenrollment, there's really gaps that are going to exist because of this enrollment because of COVID-19. But secondly, lastly, so we can move on, we're at a time, we're at a crossroads right now that we're able to slow down enough that I think that we can be able to restructure or reposition ourselves for the future. And under leaderships like this district that we live in, having so much leadership, every single person that's on this call is actually a chairman. And me as a young legislator, to be able to walk in as a chairman, especially when it comes to children, families, and people with disability, it gives me a great segue to be able to connect all the way to our federal government with having such a great tenure with Chairman Neal. So not to be redundant or beat a dead horse, I'm really appreciated to be here. Thank you, Madam President, and also my colleagues that I had spoken before me.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations to your father too, Adam.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman Neal. I will definitely send him.
I see Brian Ash. Go ahead.
Good morning, Madam President, and thank you for inviting us and having another legislative breakfast at Springfield College, which is very near and dear to my heart. Mr. Chairman, thank you. One of the big challenges for me is ever speaking after you, but I appreciate everything you've done over the years for Western Mass and especially the greater Springfield area. Chairman Williams, thanks for virtually inviting us into your district as well. As far as the, excuse me, I don't want to go on too long. I know I don't think you're ever going to get through all 4 questions you had there, but the biggest challenge to be a leader during the pandemic, for me, kind of touching on a little bit what Rep. Finn said, trying to balance the fears of your own personal life, your family, your children, and making sense of that, and then still keeping a face on and trying to be a leader to the public. And it's very difficult during pandemic because usually we're out with people, we're at events, we're at functions, we can talk to them, we can be more personal, we can shake their hand, we can hold their hand if they're struggling. It's very difficult because especially early on, there was so limited interaction because there was so much uncertainty. But eventually being able to do more things like this, getting group events and showing people that, yeah, we can still live a life, we can still do all the normal things during this until we come out on the other side. We just have to adapt to it. We just have to adjust. And if they see that we can do it and we're still keeping our chin up, still moving forward, I think that's the best thing you can do. A power of example is always the best thing we can do for anybody. And I will end with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to talk about the greatest challenge they've had?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Orlando Ramos, State Representative from the 9th Family District. Glad to be here with all of you this morning. To the Congressman, Madam President, thank you for having me this morning. One of the biggest challenges, I think, as a leader for me has been, you know, the fact that this is unprecedented. And, you know, typically what we do as legislators, anytime that we're faced with a challenge, I think a lot of us look to best practices. You know, we look at other communities that have gone through similar struggles. We look at getting guidance from those who have come before us and face those challenges. But this is unprecedented, and it isn't as if we could look to other communities and see, you know, how they dealt with the last pandemic. I can't go to Congressman Neal and ask him, you know, how did the city of Springfield or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts deal with this in 1994? You know, this has never happened before. So we're sort of, you know, working through this as it's happening. And I've heard several people use the analogy that we're sort of building the plane as we're flying it. And that makes sense. You know, it's exactly what it feels like is we're just trying to figure this out as we go and trying to do the best that we can. So the biggest challenge for me has been just that, you know, the fact that we can't We can't look at best practices. We can't look at, what happened, during the last pandemic and sort of recreate that now. So that's been the biggest challenge. We were just kind of making it up as time goes.
So let me, if I may, do a follow-up question, because I think you're right. Many of us have felt over this period that looking for a template, if you will, on how we go, where we go next isn't available. And as Congressman Neal mentioned, our mission, spirit, mind, and body, and leadership and service to others, you all know that because you're living it by the work that you do. What has been your guiding principle as you've made decisions, and some that have been popular, some that have not been popular, that is your checkpoint, is what guides you? So I think Orlando is a great segue to that question.
Well, I
Madam
think that,
President, if I may.
Yes,
Representative Gonzalez. Thank you again for taking the lead and bringing us all together, and Congressman Neal for your leadership and outstanding commitment to all the communities in the United States of America. Again, I think to that note, to some of the words that Congressman Neal echoed, I think too often in leadership positions, particularly in the political arena that we live in today, often politicians run to the press to point the finger and point to the problems, and don't make a phone call to find out how we can work together to find solutions. To the notion that these are unprecedented times, I think so, but also not. I believe that when you have compassion, commitment, and dedication, these are challenges that many of those that came before us, some were different challenges. Some were health issues, but some of them had no right to even voice their opinions, couldn't get an education, couldn't vote. So these challenges have been met by this country on over and over, unprecedented times. But it's the leadership and the commitment when you see our chairman of Ways and Means make that commitment, not running to the press, but running to across the aisle, to try to work as much as possible with individuals to make positive changes in our community. Because when it's all said and done, this is all small stuff that we have to be accountable for. But when we start fighting across the board with those who have different opinions than us, it is really small stuff and it becomes petty. We have to try to fight solutions. We have to fight like heavens to get our ideas across. But within the Latino community, I think one thing that this election proved over and over again is that many individuals that come and stand under tutelage of a flag don't represent the real interests of this community. So those are the challenges that I have in working with my colleagues to let them understand that we are in leadership roles, that we have an opportunity here to make some significant changes, but we got to work together. And I hope that we continue to be blessed by the opportunities that the Lord has given us every day to live, to breathe, and to fight.
thank you, Carlos.
Congressman Neal, you're unmuted. Would you like to comment on what has been guiding you?
Sure. I think that it's about the facts. I mean, I think that it's clear that we all want to put the best ribbon on the package. Nothing wrong with that. Part of what we do is marketing our ideas, but they should be fact-based, issue-driven. I look back to Joe Napolitan, who gave me a great piece of advice a long time ago. He was a world-renowned consultant. He was different than the consultants that have come along today, though, in politics. He actually cared about governing. He'd advised Jack Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, and Hubert Humphrey. I took great solace in the fact that on Saturday mornings, he advised me. But he gave me a very salient piece of advice a long, long time ago on a Saturday morning at the Appermont Triangle, where his office was. And he said, just remember, you'll give a better answer tomorrow when you think about it. And that's been a guiding principle for me. I think trying to resist the urgency of social media to comment fast and be wrong. And I think that our institutions of governance are not based on personalities. They're based upon time-tested theories. And a democracy is supposed to be noisy. There's a great deal of clutter to democracy. I understand that. But you take the narrative and then you move on. And I think more and more people you meet along the way are better at creating the narrative than they are at the amendment placing process. You know, your peers know who you are. They know whether in a classroom they're good teachers. You know the really good doctors, good lawyers, good professionals you've met, the good legislators. And that's very true of Congress. People know the members of Congress who could really make things happen. And that means for somebody like me, you could also, Buddy, my pal since childhood, Buddy talked about the Baptist church. Well, in the Roman Catholic tradition, there's confession. And I take those confessions every day about people who tell me that their initiative will change the world. My job is to sift and sort what they've told me and see if it stands up under the magnifying glass of critical analysis. But one example that I would give, because you raised the question, Madam President, in the run-up to the Iraq War, when more than 70% of the American people favored the invasion of Iraq based upon the now discredited idea that there were weapons of mass destruction, there were really a handful of us who said, let's see the facts. And I look back at that and I think if I had simply followed the whim of public opinion, I would have voted for the war in Iraq. And instead, I searched the facts, and not only did I vote against it, I got up and spoke against it. It was wildly unpopular when that took place. And here we are, 20 years later, we're still in Iraq. And I look at some of those decisions, and I think for the elected, we have the responsibility to tell people, look, I love you, but I think you're wrong. And I think there's a greater reticence about that in public life today. I think if you're not stirring up the base or keeping the base permanently agitated, then for some reason it makes it harder for you to try to go about day-to-day governance. Our institutions are precious. And the last point I'll make on that is our First Amendment guarantees a second opinion. That's an essential ingredient in democracy.
These are not new thoughts for you. I did my homework and looked at your commencement speeches from 1989 and 2003, where you also received an honorary degree. So, Dr. Neal, I'm going to ask you to comment on something you said a long time ago, which is always dangerous, right? But I think that you'll remember that you talked about the greatest threat to democracy is us being divisive. And you mentioned it in your opening comments as well. So there is a fine line between disagreeing and being divisive. If you were talking to my class, and after Congressman Neal or Dr. Neal answers, I'll open back up. If you were talking to this group of 20 and 21-year-olds, and many of you have children that age or have grandchildren that age, what would you tell them? How would you navigate the right world of being responsive, being accountable? We heard that earlier, but disagreeing in a healthy manner. So I open it up to what characteristics and how do you respond to that dichotomy between agitation and moving things forward? I'll start with Congressman Neal and then we'll open it up.
Well, I'm just finishing a really fine book, and it is called Lincoln on the Verge. And Lincoln was not just a public servant, he was a very skilled politician. When you consider his achievement at winning the nomination, he was nobody's first choice, but he was everybody's second choice. Got elected president with about 39% of the vote. 1% of the vote in Virginia, by the way, probably less than some of the other southern states. But they decided that in the moment of great turbulence, because after the Dred Scott decision, as you know, we're going to civil war. There's no going back. The clouds have gathered. And the point that the author makes, Widmer, is that Lincoln decides that as an act of national healing, he is going to take a train, or a series of trains from Springfield, Illinois, through the heartland and engage hundreds of thousands of people along the way. States have seceded from the Union. The inaugural gap from September, October until the election in November, and then the swearing in at that time was March 4th. So these 6 months were awful for the country. But Lincoln believes that symbolism is important. He needs to show the world that the American people are up to the challenge. And he gives a series of, as I'm reading them, and I have followed every word I think he's ever offered, he gives a series of healing comments along the way. It takes the oath, sees us through the Civil War, and always for him, it was an act of rebellion, not a civil war. Advised time and again to let the Southern states maintain slavery and come back to the Union, and he says under no circumstances. And the inaugural address that he gives, which I'm looking at the stairs here, by the way, if I turn to my right, in 1865, with malice toward none and charity for all. Now, he qualified that certainly as it related to Jefferson Davis or Robert E. Lee. He never forgave them. But he said to the rest of the American people, you're back in union. And I think that oftentimes the words that we use can be so charged and incendiary that they push people away. So if we can find a healing moment, nothing wrong with a little bit of invective from time to time to make your point. But the carnage that comes of ill-chosen words, when perhaps a softer touch might bring people aboard, makes a great deal of sense.
Well said. I know it's hard for you all have to follow him, right? But I know you can. Bud, what do you think? How do you, if you're working with young people, how do you relay to them the importance of standing up for what you believe is right, making difficult decisions, but also being a part of a team, a community, and leading?
I think, Chairman Neal is a history buff, and we learned so much from him. And he referenced Lincoln and the Union, and it's funny. I've been dealing a lot with enslavement to emancipation, and I've been going back to 1619 when African Americans first came to America, enslaved. And I've been focusing a lot on Washington at the time. The capital was a territory, and they carved it out of Virginia and all that. And what folks had to endure. And the abolitionists, we forget about the good white abolitionists that worked so hard to fight this brutal system of enslavement that existed, and the tenacity of people. And as Congressman talked about the Union, and the Civil War actually saved democracy, it saved the Union. It was very important, but I think the important part, as I continue reading and studying, is that there were so many people who were working together. We often forget that. And even through the Civil Rights Movement, the 60s and the 70s, which most people will remember. They need to go back and read the Black history is the American history, but they need to go back and even in the Civil Rights Movement, there's a lot of people working together. You had Blacks and whites, brown, making the system work. And I think that's what is going to propel us. This divisiveness that exists today, and it exists today as we witnessed the awful, I'm not gonna call it a hate crime, I'm not an expert, in Atlanta on yesterday. These things are real. And if the message isn't coming from the top, as Chairman Neal knows, that by the time it trickles down to folks, in the valley, so to speak, and not on the mountaintop, it then starts the feeling of non-belonging to this country. And that's bad, because when people of all persuasions, creeds, and colors, when folks don't feel they're part of it, you can then sell the negative message, as we found out about 5 years ago. When folks are hanging out there and they're feeling as if nothing's going right, and everything's going wrong and they're not making it and they're being cheated, you sell them a message of hate. We had a guy back many years ago, they call him Hitler, and he sold it, and he sold it well. So we have to be very careful. We have to, as leaders, blend together. We're not going to agree on strategies, but we can agree on goals. And I think it's important that we send the message that we're working together as a unit, as a country, and everybody has to feel as if they're part of the process. Because they don't feel like they're part of the process, then now you got the hate mongers who come along and they sell hate. There's folks out here that want to divide us. They want, and Congressman Neal's in Washington. This is the last couple months have demonstrated to us that this insurgent thing is real. There are people that still want to take this union down. As I had said this many years ago, the war is still going on. So I think that my message is unity, working together, bringing everybody into, like Lyndon Baines Johnson talked about the big tent, having the big tent, putting everybody under the big tent. That's important. That's important. I think that's what we sell.
Thank you, Bud. You know, at this point, we haven't heard from our aides, and I know that our aides do incredible work for not only those that they're working closely with, but for the people of the areas that they represent. And so, Jennifer, Gia, Caitlin, if you'd like to respond to any of those questions, you're working alongside individuals that are leading, but we don't lead alone. And so I'd welcome the opportunity to hear from you. Any thoughts or comments about leadership or what you learned in the last year, your greatest challenge, any of those that we've mentioned that would you want to share your thoughts on?
It certainly seems like your morning. I'm Jennifer with Senator Lesser's office. Thank you, Chairman Neal, for all of your work and leadership, and Bud, all of you have really done a terrific job in this really, really challenging time. I'm happy to work for a leader who has been vocal and out front. I am also really happy that we've kept constituents in our focus. And that's really been the challenge and the sanity giving of this time, is to really listen to the people and to listen to their hearts and to take the time to hear their pain. This has been a very, very difficult time for a lot of people. And we've tried to be there for them and try to make the changes going forward to rebuild and recover better. And we'll see how it goes. Again, I appreciate everyone's leadership. I think we've learned we can't do this alone. We must work together. And we lean on each other quite a bit as staff and as the elected leaders in our community. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you, Jennifer. Gia or Caitlin, any thoughts?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Gia Varlato. I work for Representative Angelo Pupolo. He sends his regards as he's unable to be here today, but he wants everyone to know of his continued support and that our door is always open if you ever need anything. I think for me, I am a relatively new team member and I joined the team in September. So joining in the middle of COVID-19 has definitely been challenging and a new experience, that's for sure. One of the things I think that I've noticed the most is technological challenges and how pervasive that's been in every aspect of our lives, whether or not you're a leader and having to meet on Zoom, or whether or not you're dealing with constituent work or just having the simple access to send a form that someone may need who doesn't have email. That sometimes can tie people up in a lot of ways, or education. But I think something to keep in mind of all of that is that we've really done a good job uniting. And in the middle of all of this turbulence and chaos, I think people have really come together. And I've seen that a lot just beginning my career in politics. And I think it's a good way to start and definitely to remain hopeful for the future. And I just want to say thank you again for all of your leadership, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nice, Gia. Thank you. Caitlin, the floor is yours.
Oh, wow. It's really hard to follow up after these two great other aides, and thank you so much for having us. My name is Caitlin. I'm representing Senator Velasquez's office, who represents the 2nd Hampden, New Hampshire district. Similar to Gia, I started back in June when the senator was elected, so it was getting really involved in the beginning of the COVID outbreak, just right in that middle part. It's been really difficult to see how many constituents are in need, all the extreme difficulties that they're experiencing with unemployment. I really want to echo what Gia said in regards to access to technology from students to members of our communities. That has been a huge barrier, and sometimes it's just trying to help them figuring out how to get those documents through and possibly finding that safe way to provide that help here in our office. Again, thank you so much to every single one of you on this call for all that you're doing in our communities. I greatly appreciate you.
Thank you. Perfect. So as we get ready to close, many of you, and I'm sorry if not everybody has one, but we sent you a little mug. Did you have your mug? Yeah. So we want, okay, because my marketing guru, Steve Rollier, many of you know him, is not too far away from me. He wants to get that photo. So you need to hold your mug up, and you have to hold it in such a way that it says Springfield College, right? Because we were, as Congressman Neal said, our brand is important. So smile. Perfect. So in closing, that's the great thing about Zoom. You start on time, and I know many of you probably have an 11 o'clock, and so I want to be very respectful and honor your time here. Let me first begin by thanking all of you for taking an hour out. I must say, it might be telling you how my week has gone, but this has been the best Zoom I've had all week. Just to hear the optimism and to hear leaders serving others, it's really humbling. I feel very humbled to have spent this time with you this morning, and I'm glad that we made it happen, because I think one of the most important things is that we reflect during a time like this on and taking the time to reflect, because we're moving at such a rapid pace that oftentimes we need to stop and look back, see where we've gone, and see where we need to go. And so I'm going to let the Congressman, Dr. Neal, close us out with some comments. And as he finishes, I just want to wish you all well. I hope your families are well, and I look forward to seeing you in person someday soon. Okay, Congressman Neal.
Thank you, Madam President. Thanks to the really fine legislators and staff members that are on the call as well. They've been terrific allies of mine and very helpful at pivotal moments along the way. Again, I want to thank the President. The beauty of Springfield College is apparent, particularly to somebody like me who uses that track in the fall. I mean, you can't find a better address. And the learning that takes place, the courage that Dr. Glenn Olds showed against all odds in inviting Dr. King in 1964. There were National Guardsmen on the streets of Springfield, and Glenn Olds stayed with that invitation. And I think that that's part of the spirit that imbues that institution. We've experienced now in the last few years war, weather, and now pestilence. I know Buddy would like that because of those biblical phrases. But the other part of it is that our democracy is always fragile. You need good people. And investing in good people makes all the difference in the world. And I would hope that as we look at governance, it's not just about the personalities, it's not about the loud, it's about the effective and the competent, and people who are willing to confront, as I started with this conversation, their most fervent supporters and say to from them time to time, I love you, but I don't agree with you on this one. And you can find a path forward with some patience, understanding, and some tolerance. This is a tumultuous period of time. I thought the two young staffers talking about technology, that was pretty applicable. You should know, I would never have gotten elected if it were not for the handshake and eye contact. My career was built upon a much different model, and I would recommend it still today. Let people take the measure of you as you present your argument. And I think that The problem with technology, as our staffers mentioned, there's no context. And when I sit down with the Speaker of the House, as I will in her ornate office later on today, when we go back and forth on pretty complicated legislation, I won't get a text from her later on today. I'll get a phone call if she's thinking about something. And I'll return that call promptly if I'm not available at the moment. So I think that we should never forget that behind the great advances that we've made in technology, that it also affords people an opportunity to distance themselves from government. Where I think, as Buddy noted, that day-to-day campaigning, I've been through those churches with him over many, many years. And I think that personal contact, I say to those staffers in my office all of the time, return those phone calls, pay attention to what people say, and if they're having a problem with a Social Security check, get it for them. Because in the end, that's the connection that they see to government. So thanks, Madam President. Springfield College is just terrific, and people that are on this call, they're terrific too.
Thank you. Thank you all. Be well. And again, I look forward to seeing you in person someday soon.